The day I told my daughter I was getting remarried, she blocked me. No explanation, no conversation, just silence. One minute she was replying with heart emojis to my good morning texts, and the next, nothing. My calls went straight to voicemail. My messages never got delivered. At first I thought it was a mistake, a network issue. Maybe she dropped her phone, or lost it, or maybe she was just busy. But by the second day, when I saw that she had unfollowed me on every single platform, including the cooking blog we started together, I knew it wasn't an accident. It was personal. She wanted to erase me. And for what? Because I told her I had found someone who made me smile again. Because I dared to feel happy after spending years alone, aching in the quiet corners of an empty house she once filled with laughter. The ache in my chest that day wasn't just heartbreak. It was confusion, disappointment, and a sadness I couldn't explain. I hadn't expected her to throw a party or pop champagne, but I also didn't expect her to vanish from my life, like I'd done something unforgivable. I stared at my phone screen for hours that evening, rereading our last conversation over and over. There was nothing in it that hinted at anger. No warning signs, just a daughter who used to call me her everything, suddenly treating me like I was nothing. It had been a week since I last heard from her. I still woke up every morning hoping to see her name pop up on my phone, maybe a text, a voice message, something. But every morning greeted me with the same heavy silence. I found myself sitting by the window, clutching my mug of coffee like it could warm the hollow space inside my chest. The house felt colder now, emptier. Not because anything had changed in the walls or the furniture, but because she was gone. Emotionally gone. I didn't realize how much of my world still revolved around her until she removed herself from it. The strange part was, I'd waited so long to tell her. I had met Daniel 2 years ago, completely by accident. A kind, gentle man I bumped into at the grocery store of all places. I had dropped a bag of oranges, and he helped me gather them with a warm smile and a quiet laugh. Something about him felt safe, familiar. He didn't try to impress. He didn't play games. He listened. After years of carrying the weight of life on my own, someone listening to me without judgment felt like oxygen. At first, I kept the relationship to myself. I didn't want to shake the fragile balance I had with my daughter. She'd always been protective, especially after the divorce. She'd been only 10 when her father walked away, and even now, at 25, she still carried the scars. Every man after him, even the kindest ones, made her nervous. As if loving someone new meant erasing the past. I never blamed her. I understood. But Daniel was different. He never pushed me, never asked too much. He just stayed, quietly, patiently, lovingly. When I finally decided to tell her, I rehearsed the conversation for weeks. I thought about every possible reaction. Tears, confusion, even anger. But not this. Not disappearing, not cutting me off like I was a stranger. What broke me most wasn't just losing her presence. It was the idea that she believed I had betrayed her, that my happiness somehow meant I was leaving her behind. Daniel noticed the change in me right away. He didn't ask for much detail, just held my hand, rubbed small circles into my palm, and told me he was there. No pressure, no demands, just there. I tried to be strong around him to hide the storm that lived in my chest, but one evening I cracked. We were sitting on the couch, some old jazz song playing in the background, and I just said it. She blocked me, Daniel. My own daughter. I told her I was getting remarried, and she left. Like I was nothing. His eyes softened, and for a moment he didn't speak. Then he said something that stuck with me. Sometimes love makes people afraid, and sometimes it makes them act like they don't care at all, just to protect the pieces that are still hurting. I nodded, but inside I felt something deeper than hurt. I felt something breaking, something I didn't know how to fix. A part of me wanted to drive straight to her apartment, bang on the door, demand answers. But I didn't. I couldn't. I was too afraid of what I might see in her eyes if she opened that door. Disgust, maybe even hate. So I waited. Days turned into weeks. Her silence grew louder, echoing through every part of my life. I stopped checking my phone obsessively. I stopped bringing up her name in conversation, even though she never left my thoughts. I told myself she needed space, that maybe she was processing things in her own way, but deep down I was beginning to wonder if I had lost her for good. Daniel stayed calm through it all. He didn't push me to move forward with wedding plans. He didn't get upset when I asked for time. He just kept showing up, making tea in the mornings, folding laundry, cooking dinner when I was too tired to think. There was something comforting in his steadiness. It made me wonder why I ever waited so long to let someone back in. And yet that guilt always returned, because the one person I wanted to share all this joy with was the very one who had locked me out. Then one afternoon, something strange happened. I was organizing some boxes in the attic, trying to keep busy, when I came across an old memory book, the one I had made for her 10th birthday. I sat down on the wooden floor and opened it slowly. Page after page of photos, birthday parties, school awards, family picnics, and right there, between a photo of her holding a melting ice cream cone and another of her in a Halloween costume, was a picture that made my breath catch. It was from a summer day at the park. She was 7, I think. In the photo, she was standing beside a man, not her father, not me, a stranger who looked oddly familiar. He was kneeling down, handing her a small stuffed bear, her eyes wide with excitement. I remembered that day vividly now, how she had run off toward the fountain, slipped on the pavement, and scraped her knee. How a man nearby had rushed over before I could even react, helped her up, calmed her down, and stayed with us until she stopped crying. She had called him her hero for months after that, drew pictures of him, talked about him like he was some kind of real-life superhero. I stared at the photo again, looked closer, and then slowly the pieces began to fall into place. It was Daniel. Older, yes. A little more gray around the temples, but that smile, it was the same. I sat there for a long time, the scrapbook still open on my lap, my heart thudding in my chest. She had no idea that the man she was so angry about, the one she thought had stolen me away, was the same man who once picked her up when she was bleeding and scared. Her childhood hero was now her future stepfather. I didn't know what to feel at first. Shock, disbelief, maybe even a little fear. The coincidence was almost too perfect, like something out of a movie. Could this really be happening? Was life really circling back in such a strange, quiet way? I stared at that photo until my eyes burned, remembering how she'd clung to his leg that day, refusing to let go until he promised she could keep the little bear he gave her. She'd named it Mr. Brave. She slept with it every night for 2 years. I remember because I used to tuck her in and find it curled under her arm right next to her cheek. I brought the scrapbook downstairs, my hands trembling just a little. Daniel was in the kitchen humming as he stirred a pot of soup. He looked up and smiled, but when he saw my face, he paused. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. I sat down at the table and slid the scrapbook across to him, pointing to the photo. "Do you remember this?" I asked. He leaned forward, squinting for a moment before his eyes widened slightly. A soft breath escaped his lips, and he nodded slowly. "That was years ago," he said. "In the park. I remember her. She scraped her knee and you were rushing over." My heart was pounding. "That's my daughter," I whispered. He looked up at me, stunned. "That little girl was your daughter," I nodded. The room fell into silence. For a long moment we just looked at each other, both of us caught in the weight of the realization. The man who had comforted my daughter during one of her earliest childhood memories was the same man I had fallen in love with years later. It didn't feel like coincidence anymore. It felt like something else, something deeper. Daniel sat back in his chair, rubbing a hand over his mouth. "I can't believe this," he murmured. "She used to call me her hero, didn't she?" I let out a quiet laugh, tears suddenly stinging my eyes. "She did. She talked about you for months. You gave her that bear. She called it Mr. Brave." Daniel's eyes softened, and he smiled faintly. "I remember that bear." I wiped at my eyes and exhaled. She has no idea who you are. She thinks I'm choosing a stranger over her. But if she knew—" I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to. The thought hung heavy between us. Would it even matter now? Would knowing the truth change anything? Or had her anger buried her memories too deep? Daniel reached across the table and took my hand in his. "Then maybe," he said softly, "it's time she remembered." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind running in circles. What were the chances that fate had led me back to the one person who had once comforted my daughter in a moment of fear? And what were the chances that she had completely forgotten him? Or maybe she hadn't. Maybe deep inside, a part of her still remembered the man who gave her that sense of safety when she needed it most. But would that part of her even matter now, after weeks of silence, after all the walls she had built between us? The next morning, I did something I hadn't done since she blocked me. I wrote her a letter, not an email, not a text, a real handwritten letter. I don't know why. Maybe it was because I wanted her to feel the weight of my words, or maybe because I was tired of being erased through screens. I didn't beg. I didn't defend myself. I just spoke from my heart. I told her how much I loved her, how proud I was of the woman she had become, how I never expected her to cheer for me right away, but that I had hoped she would at least try to understand. I reminded her of the day at the park, of the man who helped her when she fell, who made her laugh through her tears and gave her Mr. Brave. I told her his name was Daniel, and I told her, "That's the man I'm marrying." I sealed the envelope and sat with it in my lap for a long time before finally walking down to the mailbox. As I slid it in, I whispered a silent prayer, not for her to forgive me, but for her to remember. A few more days passed, still nothing. No reply, no calls. I told myself I had done what I could, that she had the truth now, and whatever came next was in her hands. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. I still hoped. Still checked my phone a little too often. Still looked out the window like maybe she'd pull up in her old car, come rushing up the steps and throw her arms around me like she used to when she was little. But instead, what came was something I didn't expect at all. One afternoon, just as I was finishing a load of laundry, Daniel walked in holding a small package. "This was left on the porch," he said, handing it to me with a curious look. There was no name on the outside, just our address in familiar handwriting. I opened the box slowly, heart racing. Inside, resting neatly on top of soft tissue paper, was Mr. Brave. The same little bear, old and worn, one ear slightly bent just like I remembered, and tucked beneath it a folded note in her handwriting. 5 simple words. "I remember. We need to talk." I stared at those 5 words over and over, barely blinking. My hands trembled and my throat felt tight, like I'd been holding my breath for weeks without realizing it. I remember. We need to talk. That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just a door creaking open after being slammed shut. It wasn't much, but to me it felt like sunlight pouring through a crack in the wall I thought would never break. Daniel stood beside me, watching my reaction closely. "Is that from her?" he asked softly. I nodded, unable to speak. I held up the tiny bear, Mr. Brave, and smiled through tears. "She remembered him. She remembered you." Daniel let out a long breath and sat down beside me. "That's something," he said gently. "That's a start." We didn't say much after that. We didn't need to. The weight of that moment filled the room. Years of distance starting to shift. Pain slowly being replaced by something gentler. Hope. Later that evening, I sat on the edge of my bed holding the note, wondering what she was feeling on the other side of this sudden reach out. Was she angry? Confused? Ashamed? Maybe all of it. I didn't know. But the fact that she had sent this at all meant something inside her had changed. I didn't want to rush her. I knew this had to happen on her terms. So I didn't text her. I didn't call. I just waited. Again. This time, I didn't have to wait long. The very next afternoon, my phone lit up with a call. Her name was there, clear as day. I froze. My fingers hovered over the screen, too scared to answer, too scared she might hang up before I could. But I pressed accept and held the phone to my ear, barely able to breathe. "Mom?" Her voice cracked on the other end, soft, hesitant. I couldn't even get a word out at first. I swallowed the lump in my throat and whispered, "I'm here." There was a pause. Then she sighed, long and heavy, like she'd been carrying something too big for too long. "I'm sorry I disappeared. I didn't know how to feel. It hurt, and I didn't understand why. I thought maybe you were replacing me." My heart broke all over again. "Sweetheart," I said quietly, "no one could ever replace you. You are my daughter, always." "I know that now," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. And I remembered him, the man from the park. That day you mentioned, it came back all at once. I couldn't believe it. I was so sure I hated him without even knowing who he was. "It's okay," I said gently. "You didn't know, now you do." She was quiet for a moment, then she said something that made my chest ache in the best way. "Can I come over tomorrow? I want to see you. I want to meet him, really meet him." I smiled, eyes wet, voice trembling. "Yes, baby, of course you can." The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I don't know if it was nerves or excitement or maybe both, but I couldn't sleep another minute. I tidied the house even though it didn't need tidying. I rearranged the flowers on the kitchen table 3 times. I kept checking the clock every few minutes, like I was back in school waiting for the final bell. Daniel stayed calm through it all. He brewed coffee, made toast, and offered to step out for a while to give us space. But I shook my head. "She wants to meet you," I reminded him. "Really meet you." Still, I could tell he was nervous in his own quiet way. He kept smoothing down his shirt, pacing a little near the window. And when the doorbell finally rang, we both froze for a second, staring at each other like 2 kids caught sneaking out after curfew. I walked to the door slowly, every step feeling like it carried the weight of everything we'd been through. When I opened it, there she was, my daughter, standing on the porch with her hands stuffed in her coat pockets and her eyes already watery. She looked the same and completely different all at once, older, wiser, but still mine. "Hi," she said softly. I reached for her before I could even speak, pulling her into a hug that was too tight, too long, and just right all at once. She clung to me like she was afraid I'd disappear again, or maybe she was afraid she would. When we finally pulled apart, I brushed her hair back like I used to when she was little. "Come in," I said. She stepped inside, and her eyes quickly landed on Daniel, who was standing just behind me, trying not to look too anxious. For a moment, they just stared at each other. It was quiet. So quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. Then she smiled, not forced, not guarded, just a small, honest smile. "I remember your face," she said, her voice soft. "That day in the park. I didn't even know how scared I was until you helped me." Daniel stepped forward slowly. "You were very brave," he said gently. "That's why I gave you Mr. Brave, remember?" She let out a short laugh, wiping at her eyes. "I still have him. He's a little flatter now, but he's there." Daniel chuckled. "Most brave things get a little worn out over time." And just like that, the tension broke. She walked in further and sat at the kitchen table. I poured her some tea while Daniel quietly joined us. The 3 of us sat there like a family. Not perfect, not fully healed, but connected again. She didn't ask many questions, and we didn't force anything. We just sat, talked, and laughed a little. It felt fragile, like holding something made of glass. But it also felt real. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I could finally breathe. The hours slipped by quietly, like we were trying not to disturb something delicate. We didn't talk about the weeks of silence. We didn't bring up the hurtful things left unsaid. Instead, we talked about little things. Work, old memories, a recipe she'd recently tried and failed, a book Daniel had just finished. It was light, careful conversation, but underneath it was something heavier, an unspoken agreement that this was the beginning of something new. At one point, she turned to Daniel and asked, "So, how did you and my mom meet again?" Her tone was calm, even a little curious, But I could hear something else there, too. She wasn't just asking for the story. She was testing the ground between us. Daniel smiled, shifting in his seat. "It was the oranges," he said simply. She blinked. "Oranges?" I laughed, remembering the scene clearly now. "I dropped a whole bag of them at the store. He helped me pick them up, very romantic." Her eyes lit up just a little, the kind of smile that starts slow and surprises you. "That sounds like something out of a movie." "It felt that way," I said, not needing to add anything more. There was a small pause before she nodded. "And you didn't know who I was?" Daniel shook his head. "No, I didn't put it together. Not until your mom showed me that old photo. You'd changed, grown up. But when I saw your eyes in that picture, I remembered." She looked down at her hands, tracing her thumb over a ring on her finger. "I kept that memory so close when I was little. You were the first stranger who made me feel safe." Her voice caught, and I reached out, placing my hand gently over hers. "I never meant to hurt you by moving on," I said softly. "But I also didn't expect that the man I'd fall in love with would be someone you'd already trusted once before. It wasn't planned, and it wasn't fast. It just happened." She nodded again, but this time slower. "I know," she whispered. I thought if you remarried, it meant you were finally closing the chapter that had me in it." Her words nearly shattered me. "No," I said quickly, firmly. "You're not a chapter. You're the whole book. You're part of every page, every line. Loving someone new doesn't mean I'm turning away from you. It means I'm trying to build something again, not replace what I had." She looked up, her eyes glossy. "Then I think I was just scared, and I didn't know how to say that." "I get it," I told her. "I was scared too." Daniel didn't interrupt. He just sat there, letting us talk, letting us find each other again. In that quiet kitchen, we didn't solve everything, but we found understanding. And sometimes, that's more powerful than 1,000 apologies. It was the first step back to each other, and neither of us turned away. After she left that evening, the house felt different. Not empty, not heavy like before. It felt hopeful, like something had been gently lifted off the walls, off my shoulders, off my heart. I watched from the window as she walked to her car. She paused before opening the door and looked back toward the house. Our eyes met, just for a moment. She smiled, a real one this time, and I knew we were going to be okay. Not perfect, but okay. The following days were quiet again, but in a better way. We didn't talk every minute, but there were messages here and there. A good morning text from her, a picture of her coffee with the caption, "Not as good as yours." Small things, but after the silence, they felt like music. Then, one afternoon, she sent me a message that made my heart skip. "Can we all have dinner this weekend? I want to talk more. Just the three of us." I stared at the screen for a long moment, letting those words sink in. She wasn't just trying anymore. She was opening up. That Saturday, she came over a little earlier than planned. She brought dessert. Store-bought, slightly tilted in the box, but I didn't care. I hugged her at the door longer this time. She didn't pull away. Daniel met her with a warm smile and a light joke about having backup dessert just in case. She laughed. We ate together like a family, talked, joked, and somewhere between the second helping of mashed potatoes and her third glass of wine, the conversation turned deeper again. She looked at me, then at Daniel. "I still don't know how I feel about everything," she said honestly. "But I want to. I want to try, because I remember how I felt that day in the park. And I remember how it felt to lose my mom, even just for a little while. And I don't ever want to feel that again." I reached over and squeezed her hand, not needing to say anything. Then she turned to Daniel. "You didn't just help me that day. You helped her now. I see it. You brought something back to her that I didn't realize she'd lost." Daniel's face softened. "I didn't take her away from you," he said gently, "but I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to lose her again." Tears welled up in her eyes, and mine too. She nodded, blinking them away quickly, trying to stay composed. But in that moment, all the pieces of us, once shattered, started coming together again. That night, after she left, Daniel turned to me and said, "She's strong, just like you." And I smiled, realizing he was right. She was stronger than I gave her credit for. Strong enough to come back, strong enough to forgive, strong enough to start over. And so were we. The next few weeks moved slowly, gently, like waves lapping at the shore, soft but steady. She began visiting more often, not always for deep talks, but just to be around. Sometimes she'd stop by for coffee or bring over laundry and sit on the couch folding it while chatting about her day. Other times, she'd come by just to steal leftovers and leave again with a quick hug. It wasn't forced. It wasn't tense. It was natural. And after everything we had been through, I didn't take a second of it for granted. One evening, she brought over an old photo album she had kept in her closet for years. The cover was fraying, and some of the plastic sleeves had peeled from age, but when she opened it, every page held pieces of our life. First day of school photos, beach trips, snowmen in the front yard. She sat cross-legged on the living room floor, flipping through the pages as I sat beside her. Daniel joined us too, sitting on the other side, quiet but present. She pointed to a picture of her with missing front teeth and chocolate on her face. "This one," she said, laughing. "I remember crying because I thought my teeth would never grow back." "You refused to smile for a whole month," I added, and she burst out laughing. Then, near the back of the album, she found another picture, one I didn't even remember placing there. It was her holding Mr. Brave, wrapped in a towel after a bath, her face squished against the bear's fuzzy head. She stared at it quietly for a while, then looked up. "Do you think I remembered him because he made me feel safe? Like how I used to feel around you?" she asked softly. I didn't answer right away. I just touched her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. Daniel spoke instead. "Maybe that feeling never really left you. Maybe it just got buried under fear and time." She nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the photo. "It's strange," she whispered. "For a long time I was angry. I thought you were choosing someone else over me, but now it almost feels like life gave me back something I didn't know I lost." She closed the album and leaned back against the couch, letting out a long breath. "You know, I used to wish my childhood hero would come back one day. I guess I didn't realize he already had." Daniel looked down, a little stunned, and when his eyes met mine, they were misty. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. We sat there in that moment, the three of us, surrounded by old memories and the quiet hum of the heater in the background. No yelling, no blame, no distance, just warmth, just presence, just healing. And as I looked at my daughter, I didn't see the girl who had blocked me, or the woman who had pulled away. I saw someone who had found her way back, not just to me, but to herself. And that was everything. A few days later, she called me while I was at the grocery store. I nearly dropped a jar of pasta sauce when I saw her name flash on the screen. Funny how something so simple could still catch me off guard. I answered quickly, and before I could even say hello, she said, "Do you and Daniel have any wedding plans yet?" I blinked. "Not really. We've been taking things slow." There was a pause, then her voice softened. "Would it be okay if I helped with it?" I didn't respond right away. I was too stunned. This was the same girl who once blocked me over the idea of getting married again. Now offering to be part of the planning? I had to steady my breath before answering. "Of course," I said, my voice barely holding steady. "I'd love that more than anything." She laughed a little on the other end, awkward and warm. "Good, because I already made a Pinterest board. It's got, like, way too many flower options and probably 15 dresses I want you to try." My heart swelled in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. I was standing in the middle of the frozen food aisle, smiling like a fool, nodding at no one. "Send me the link," I said. That night, after dinner, I showed Daniel the board. He raised an eyebrow at the number of sparkles and lace and blushing pink arrangements. "She's not holding back," he joked. "She's trying," I said, closing the laptop softly. "This is her way of showing up," and she really did show up. Over the next few weeks, she was there for everything. Venue tours, cake tastings, endless debates over napkin colors. We laughed more than we disagreed, and I could see her walls slowly falling away. Sometimes she'd slip in little stories from her childhood, like the time I made her a homemade birthday cake, shaped like a cat that looked more like a blob, or when I used to leave notes in her lunchbox that made her friends jealous. I used to pretend I was embarrassed by them, she said one day while we were going over seating charts. But honestly, I loved them. I saved every single one. That admission stayed with me. She remembered the love even when time and pain tried to bury it. One evening, while looking at mother-daughter dance songs, she turned to me and said, "I didn't just lose my temper when you told me about Daniel. I panicked. I was afraid you were finally choosing a life that didn't have space for me anymore." I touched her cheek gently. "You've always had a place in my life. Even when you pushed me away, you never left my heart. Not for a second, mate, Tim." She nodded, tears brimming. "I believe you now." The wedding wasn't just bringing Daniel and me together. It was slowly stitching back the bond I thought I'd lost with my daughter, and it was stronger than before. The day of the wedding arrived faster than I expected. The morning sunlight poured through the curtains like it had been waiting just for this moment. The house was buzzing with quiet excitement, steam curling from teacups, the soft shuffle of people moving about, the faint hum of music playing in the background. My dress hung neatly in the bedroom, the hem brushing the floor like a whisper. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like me. Simple, soft, and full of new beginnings. She came early, knocking lightly before stepping in. Her hair was pinned up in soft waves, and she wore a pale blue dress that made her eyes look even gentler. In her hands, she held a small box. "I brought something," she said, a little shy. "It's nothing big, just something I've been holding on to." I sat down on the edge of the bed while she opened the lid. Inside was a necklace, delicate, silver, with a small heart-shaped charm. "You gave me this when I turned 13, she said. "I wore it for years. When I got older, I tucked it away so I wouldn't lose it. But I think maybe you should wear it today." My throat tightened as I looked at it. I remembered buying it, wrapping it in tissue paper and writing a little note that said, "This heart will always find its way back to you." I reached out slowly and she helped clasp it around my neck. Her fingers brushed the back of my skin, and I felt a soft shiver, not from the cold, but from the overwhelming weight of what this moment meant. All the silence, all the tension, all the hurt. It was fading, replaced by something steadier, something real. As I turned to face her, she smiled. "You look beautiful, Mom." I cupped her face, holding her like I used to when she was small and scared after a nightmare. "So do you," I whispered. "I'm so proud of you." We stood there for a moment, just mother and daughter. No more questions, no more doubt. Later, when the ceremony began, she walked down the aisle first, holding a small bouquet I had made for her myself. Daniel stood at the front, calm and collected, but when he saw her, I noticed something in his eyes, a glimmer of quiet gratitude. And when I joined him moments later, my daughter watching with tear-filled eyes from the front row, I felt whole. The vows were simple, honest. We promised not just love, but patience, forgiveness, laughter. Life had been heavy for too long, and now we were choosing something lighter together. After the ceremony, as we stood greeting guests, my daughter came up behind me and whispered, "You know, I'm glad it's him." I turned to her. "You mean Daniel?" She nodded. "Yeah. I don't think I ever told you, but after that day in the park, I always hoped I'd see him again." I smiled, tears brimming. "Looks like we both got our wish." The reception was held in the backyard, under soft string lights we'd hung the day before, each one swaying gently in the breeze. The air smelled like fresh flowers and buttercream, and for the first time in what felt like years, there was no tension hanging between us, just laughter, clinking glasses, music, and the sound of stories being shared by people who mattered. She stayed close by my side most of the evening, introducing herself to guests she hadn't seen in years, occasionally glancing at Daniel with a small smile, like she was still trying to believe the man from her childhood memory had truly become part of her life again. After dinner, one of the servers brought out the cake. As people gathered around, someone from the crowd shouted, "Speech!" A few people clapped in agreement, and before I could even respond, my daughter stepped forward and picked up the microphone. I froze. She looked at me with that same shy smile she'd worn the day she gave me the necklace. Then she turned to the guests. "I wasn't planning to say anything tonight," she began, her voice a little shaky. "But then I realized this isn't just a wedding. It's something a lot more than that." The crowd quieted, leaning in. For those of you who know my mom, you already know how strong she is, how much she's given up over the years, how many times she put herself last so I could come first. But for a long time, I didn't see that. Or maybe I forgot. And when she told me she was getting remarried, I didn't take it well. I thought she was moving on from me. I thought I'd been replaced. She paused and looked down, collecting herself. But what I didn't understand then was that she wasn't replacing anything. She was finally choosing something for herself. And I wasn't being left behind. I was being invited to come along. My eyes stung as she turned to Daniel, and to the man who, without knowing it, gave a scared little girl a moment of safety years ago. "Thank you for doing it again now. For her, for us." She looked back at me. "I love you, Mom, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say it out loud again." There was a beat of silence, and then the crowd erupted in applause. My chest felt too full to breathe. She stepped toward me, tears streaming down her face, and I didn't wait. I wrapped my arms around her and held her like I never wanted to let go. That night, as the sky darkened and the stars began to peek through, I realized something I hadn't truly felt before. Not just peace, not just healing, but joy. Pure, unshaken joy, and I hadn't felt that in a very, very long time. As the evening settled into a softer rhythm, the music slowed, and people began to drift onto the dance floor. The lights above twinkled like stars, and for a moment everything felt suspended, like time had taken a breath and held it still just for us. Daniel and I shared our first dance. It was simple, slow, and quiet, the way we liked things. No dramatic dips, no spotlight moments, just the two of us, swaying gently as if the world outside didn't exist. I rested my head against his shoulder, and he leaned in to whisper, "You know, this might be the best day of my life." I smiled. "Mine too." As the song ended, I started to step away, but a gentle tap on my shoulder stopped me. It was her. "Can I steal you for a dance?" she asked, her voice light but her eyes serious. I blinked, surprised, then nodded slowly. "Always." We moved to the center of the floor, and someone started the song she had chosen. One of those soft, nostalgic ones we used to sing in the car when she was little. Windows down, both of us off-key. As we danced, she didn't say much. She just looked at me, eyes full of something I hadn't seen in a long time. Trust. "I've been thinking about that day," she said after a moment, "when I blocked you. It wasn't just about the marriage. It was about everything I hadn't dealt with. I thought I'd already healed from Dad leaving. I thought I was strong. But when you told me you were getting married, it felt like I was losing the last piece of safety I had." I held her a little closer. "I never wanted to be the reason you felt unsafe." "You weren't," she said quickly. "Not really. My fear was, I just didn't know how to separate the two." We swayed in silence for a moment before she spoke again. "But I get it now. You gave so much of your life to me. You deserve someone who gives that kind of love back to you. You deserve Daniel." I could barely respond, but I managed to whisper, "Thank you." She nodded, her cheek brushing against mine as the song ended. "And you were right. Mr. Brave did get a little flat, but I think I understand why you gave him to me in the first place." I smiled, eyes glassy. "Why's that?" "Because sometimes love isn't about protecting someone from pain. It's about showing up after the pain again and again, even when it's hard." She stepped back, and we both laughed quietly through our tears, holding each other one last time before the music changed again. That night, we didn't go back to the way things used to be. We found something better, something new, something honest. And for the first time in years, I wasn't holding on to hope anymore. I was living inside it. The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows like a soft reward. Everything felt still. peaceful, like the world had exhaled after holding its breath. The house was quiet again, but not the heavy, aching kind of quiet I'd grown used to. This silence was different, full of meaning, full of warmth, the kind that follows a good chapter in a story, not the end, but a moment where you just pause and let your heart catch up. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, still wearing my robe, the wedding bouquet lying next to me in a glass vase, petals slightly drooping but still beautiful. Daniel came in and kissed the top of my head before reaching for the kettle. He didn't say much, and he didn't need to. He had always known how to move gently through my world, especially in the moments when I was still deep in my thoughts. I glanced at my phone and saw a message from her. "Home safe. Yesterday was beautiful. I'll call later. I love you." Just like that, simple, direct, and whole. I read it 3 times, smiling quietly. Later that day, as I was folding laundry, I found a small envelope in my jacket pocket. I didn't remember putting it there. Inside was a folded note, written in her handwriting. Just in case I freeze up during the speech. I unfolded it carefully. The words were short, but they held weight. "If it takes me years to understand what you did for me, please be patient. If I get it wrong again, please don't give up on me. I'm still learning how to hold on to people without hurting them, but I want to keep trying, if you'll let me." I sat down slowly, the note shaking slightly in my hand. She was trying. Not perfectly, not always clearly, but she was trying, and that was more than enough for me. That afternoon, she stopped by without calling first, just walked in like she used to, barefoot, carrying a bag of takeout and talking about how she was starving. "I figured you'd be too tired to cook," she said with a grin. "I was," I said, laughing. "You're starting to read my mind." She kicked off her shoes, sat cross-legged on the couch, and opened the containers. "Also, I figured we could watch something, like old times." We didn't argue over what to watch. We didn't talk about the wedding or the past or anything heavy. We just sat side by side, sharing noodles, teasing each other about bad movie choices, and laughing like we hadn't skipped a beat. But something had changed. Not on the outside. She was still my daughter, stubborn and opinionated, and sweet in ways she never wanted to admit. But on the inside, there was peace now. A quiet understanding that we'd found our way back. Not perfectly, not quickly, but honestly. And somehow, that made it all feel brand new. A few weeks later, life settled into its new rhythm. Not a drastic change, but a softer one, like when you rearrange the furniture in a room you've lived in for years and suddenly it feels lighter, more open. She didn't call every day, but she called enough. Sometimes just to share a funny meme, sometimes to ask for advice on a recipe, and once, unexpectedly, to ask if Daniel could help her with her car. "Don't make it weird," she said when I teased her. "He's just better at that stuff than I am." But I knew what it meant. She was letting him in. Slowly. Not just as my partner, but as a person in her life, on his own terms. That quiet shift meant more than she realized. Daniel, of course, was his usual gentle self. He helped her without making a big deal of it. He even let her win an argument about windshield wipers, which I was certain he could have proved her wrong on, but he didn't. He smiled and handed her the keys like it was nothing. Later that evening, I found them in the driveway, sitting on the hood of her car, talking. The porch light cast a warm glow over them, and I stayed inside, watching through the kitchen window, not wanting to interrupt whatever moment they were building. She laughed at something he said, then leaned over and nudged him with her shoulder. It wasn't the kind of moment that demanded attention. It was small, quiet, but I knew it meant everything. When she came back in to say goodbye, I asked if she wanted to take some leftovers home. "Obviously," she said with a smirk. "You think I'd come here for your company?" We both laughed, and just as she was about to leave, she paused and turned back. "Oh, one more thing," she said, fishing something from her bag. It was a photo, a printed one. It was us, me, her, and Daniel, from the wedding, taken during the reception. She was standing between us, arms linked, smiling like she meant it. "I thought you'd want a copy," she said, a little shy. "I had a few printed." I took it gently, my heart swelling. "Thank you," I whispered. She gave a casual wave like it was no big deal and walked to her car. But as I stood there holding that photo, I realized something. This wasn't just a picture, it was proof. Proof that we'd made it through the storm. Proof that healing didn't have to be loud to be real. Proof that even broken things can come together and still be beautiful. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was standing between the past and the future. I felt like I was finally standing in the present. And it felt like home. Spring crept in quietly, softening the edges of winter. The flowers in the garden began to bloom again, just as if they hadn't been buried under frost for months. I found myself spending more time outside, planting, trimming, simply sitting. There was something comforting about watching life return on its own schedule. Something familiar in the way everything slowly came back to life, even the parts that once looked lifeless. She visited more often now, sometimes just for a few minutes, sometimes for hours. One afternoon, she showed up with an old binder, dusty and worn, and laid it on the table without saying a word. "What's this?" I asked, brushing it off. "My college essay drafts," she said with a small smile. "You used to read them all and mark them with your red pen. Remember how mad I'd get?" I laughed. "You were very dramatic." "I was," she agreed, "but you always made them better." We sat together flipping through pages, laughing at her messy handwriting, her bold underlines, her angry margin notes. She read aloud one of her essays about resilience, written during her final year. "It's strange," she said quietly when she finished. "Back then I thought I was talking about myself, but now I realize I was writing about you." I reached over and took her hand, the binder between us. "You were always stronger than you knew." She smiled at me, eyes misty. "I think I know now, because I see it in you." It was quiet for a while after that, a calm kind of quiet. Then, with no warning, she said, "If I ever get married, will you walk me down the aisle?" I looked at her, surprised. "You wouldn't want your father." She shook her head, cutting me off gently. "No, he left a long time ago, but you stayed. You were everything." My throat tightened. "Of course I will," I said, barely able to speak. She smiled, and it wasn't the smile of someone making peace. It was the smile of someone who had already found it. As she left that day, I watched her walk down the garden path, the breeze lifting her hair, her shoulders lighter than I remembered. And I thought back to all the days I thought I had lost her, the nights I cried alone, the ache that lived in my chest every time I imagined life without her. But she had come back, not as the girl she once was, but as a woman who had grown, stumbled, learned, and returned stronger. And in her return, she gave me something I never expected. A second chance. At love, at family, at peace, and most of all, a second chance at being her mother. Not just in name, but in presence. Fully, finally, and without fear. Time passed quietly after that. Not in a way that made it feel like life was slowing down, but in a way that felt full, peaceful, whole. The kind of quiet that didn't ache anymore. The kind that comes when wounds have finally closed and you no longer flinch at the memory of them. She called regularly now. Not out of guilt or duty, but simply because she wanted to. Sometimes she'd call just to tell me about a weird dream or a new candle scent she found. Other times, we'd sit in silence on the phone, not needing to fill the space, just letting each other exist on the other end of the line. She didn't say sorry anymore, and I didn't need her to. She said, "I love you," instead, and that was more than enough. Daniel and I settled into married life with ease, the way two people do when they've already walked through storms and learned how to hold umbrellas for each other. He never tried to take the role of father. He didn't need to. He became something better, a steady, quiet kind of presence in her life, the kind that didn't demand anything but gave everything when needed. One weekend, she brought home someone new, a man with kind eyes and nervous hands who smiled too much and said too little. She wasn't in a rush to label anything, but I could see it in the way she looked at him. There was light in her again. Hope. Maybe even love. and she had learned how to welcome it without fear that it would erase where she came from. Later that evening, when it was just the two of us on the porch watching the sky turn gold, she leaned over and said, "I never told you this, but for a long time I thought love meant giving everything until you were empty." I looked at her, waiting. But now I think, maybe love is what fills you back up. And you showed me that. I reached for her hand and held it tightly. She rested her head on my shoulder, and we stayed like that, mother and daughter, sitting in the glow of a second beginning. And if someone were to ask me now if I ever regretted falling in love again, if I ever regretted the pain, the silence, the heartbreak, I'd say no. Because love, real love, isn't perfect. It's messy. It's loud. Sometimes it breaks things before it builds them. But when it's honest, when it's patient, when it's willing to wait for someone to find their way home, it's worth everything. And somehow, against all odds, she came back. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. And that made all the difference.